This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? This is season 6, episode number 42 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Sao Paulo GP preview show. And you've got Andy, I'm joined as always by Cody tonight. Been a couple days since Sunday, but how's it hanging in this short week as we finally get to our last leg of this triple header? It's been a slice.
It has. Definitely on the computer a lot, definitely a wash in the F1 news, but to me it's exciting. Like, I feel like if we did the whole season, weekend after weekend after weekend, kind of like they do for NASCAR, that would be a little exhausting. But knowing that we've got a 3-week break coming up again, it's like I gotta get as much of it in as possible before taking the break.
Yeah, we're racing like crazy, and then we're taking a break, and then we're finishing up racing like crazy again. Somebody has to look at this calendar. It's just kind of crazy, but it's just, I guess, how that works. But let's hope for better things moving forward. But anyway, we are here to cover all of it, as always. And if you have found our show, welcome along. As the great David Croft, maybe you think he's great, maybe you don't think he's great, but as David Croft will say, welcome along. You can find our show on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and, of course, on YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you enjoy what you are seeing and you like what you're hearing, you can do as the kids do and smash that subscribe button, or you can leave us a like. Or if you're on your favorite podcasting app, specifically Apple Podcast or Spotify, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, it will help our content come up a lot better in search results. And you'd be doing us a real solid if you wanted to do that. You can email the show, as always, chat now at outlapf1.com, takes you there. Thank you so much for the folks who continue to support the show, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and, of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, get a shout out every episode at the beginning, just like all those other folks did. You can see our link in our show notes. It's our anchor page, $1, $5. It's all we ask for. It's not a lot, but if you'd like to do that, and you'd like to drop us a little bit, we would be most appreciative. Helps us to upgrade equipment that we already have or keep current with, which the name of the game is, or it allows us to do some really fun stuff like remote recordings, which we've done before, which we will do probably in our season finale. Will be one of those fun setups that we're going to have to master, but we will try to do all of that. And finally, before we hop into the GP weekend proper, you can take advantage of our code OUTLAP. That is OUTLAP, all one word. And that'll get you 20% off and free shipping from the good folks at Manscaped. And as always, we are proud to bring that offer to you. Okay, well, you wouldn't think there'd be news in a really, really short weekend. You'd think it would just be, travel news. But there has been stuff that has been happening. And the big story that came out yesterday. If you remember a few weeks back, we talked about that the FIA had announced that all 10 teams were in compliance with the cost cap from last year, that there were 2 procedural breaches, and those were for actually the OEMs versus the teams. One was Honda and the other was Alpine. Well, the FIA has now levied the official penalty, and these breaches are not cheap. Wow, I did not expect to see this. Honda has been fined $600,000 plus costs, and Alpine's been fined $400,000 plus costs in the final adjudication of the 2023 cost cap, as the FIA announced these penalties earlier this week. That's a spicy meatball, if nothing else, Cody. Any thought on it?
Looking at it from the perspective of a middle income type person, yeah, 600,000, 400,000 plus costs. That's definitely big money. Looking at it from the perspective of, especially, Honda, the, multi-billion dollar company that it is, 600,000 is probably like chump change to them. Probably kind of the same thing for Alpine, but it's definitely a pretty good amount of money. So it shows that they are willing to levy these fines now that we're a few years into the cost cap, where everyone should have things like procedures down pat, and there we would think a procedural breach like this isn't necessarily the worst type of breach that you could have. But they are willing to levy these fines now, so it makes you wonder if anyone actually more legitimately breaches the cost cap in the future, what kind of fines would be levied in that case?
Yeah, I mean, you would imagine. Well, and the whole point was when they instituted the cost cap was they wanted the penalties to kind of have teeth to really try to prevent. But I'm actually surprised with something like a procedural violation versus an actual material, real breach of the regulations that it's this bad. But I guess that's what they decided to do. But I saw those figures and I was like, whoa, so that was not what I had in my bingo card. I figured they'd get like, 50,000 or something, kind of slap on the wrist type deal, but not with those amounts. But don't be breaching the cost cap, I guess, is the lesson.
If you breach the cost cap, you'll get like a $20 decillion fine, like Russia's levying towards Google right now. It's more money than exists on Earth. So but I wouldn't put it past the FIA to levy something like that. More money on Earth in the event that somebody actually breaches the cost cap.
And if they offer to pay it in crypto, we know we got a problem. But I digress. Anywho, next story kind of in our docket affecting Mercedes and the Mercedes that have been crashing, specifically George Russell, who's crashed in the last two GP weekends. That has caused Mercedes to have to call a halt to its upgrade plans for the rest of the season. Repairs to George Russell's latest developments, while damaged in the Austin crash, will be back for the Brazil Grand Prix, but it looks like they're going to have to generate all the spares for the spec that they have, which kind of takes away from any future development. So, if you're a Mercedes fan, and we know we've got lots of Mercedes fans out there, it doesn't look like they're going to come up with that next evolutionary step that it seems like all of maybe the big three with McLaren and Red Bull and Ferrari bringing, I would say, what is it, upgrade package 3. I think Mercedes are going to be kind of stuck on upgrade package 2.5 is really kind of as it kind of figures out. But yeah, not the best news, but as something I think to be expected given the fact that Russell has kind of gone through two separate cars.
Yeah, it's really interesting how with these cost caps in place, how too many crashes or too big incidents that involve the car can actually affect your ability to upgrade to the car as time goes on. And Mercedes is definitely a team who could use more upgrades. Now we are to the point where it's pretty late in the season, so they probably figured, well, we're approaching the cost cap. We've been spending this money on fixing the car. We might as well just sit where we're at and save it for next year. As we've said on the show a few times now, Mercedes is pretty much where they're going to finish in the constructors. They're not going up, they're not going down. Pretty much no matter what they do, they could probably even sit out a race or two. So, yeah, at this point, they're just going to take that and make sure they don't breach the cost cap, and any upgrades that they intend to bring, I'm sure they will just put through more rigorous testing and try to have it on the car for next year.
Yep. Yeah, I guess that's kind of all that they really can do. So, yeah, I don't blame them for that. I mean, it is a logical move. But yeah, let's hope that they get as much result as they can out of what they have. All right, so turning a little bit to actually this Grand Prix itself, story that broke, I think, earlier today. I think Aston Martin announced Fernando Alonso, who missed last week's media day. And, not a whole lot of detail came out about why he missed the media day, but he ended up showing up on Friday and obviously competed in the weekend. He's going to have to miss media day again. We're recording Wednesday night, so it'll be tomorrow morning. After suffering an intestinal infection in the lead up to the Mexican Grand Prix, or the Mexico City Grand Prix, excuse me, he basically needed to return for Europe to have treatment. The good news is he's had the treatment. He is now recovering and is expected to land in Brazil in time to take part in Friday's running, which of course is your one solitary free practice and then straight into sprint qualifying. So you'd imagine Not a whole lot of extra rest, but yeah, I mean, at least he's going to be a part of the Grand Prix. I mean, obviously, we wish nothing but the best for a speedy recovery for the elder statesman on the grid and Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, if he had to go back to Europe for treatment, it sounds like a pretty nasty infection he's got. And I can imagine running around in a bumpy F1 car with all those G forces that you experience. Having gut problems for that would be a really, really bad time. So I definitely wish him a speedy recovery. I didn't personally hear anything about why he retired so quickly from the Mexico City Grand Prix. Maybe it was car issues. Like I said, I haven't heard anything particular about it. Who knows? Maybe he was already feeling it a lot then, and that factored into that somewhat. But yeah, I definitely would think you'd want your gut to be.
I thought it was something to do with his radiator. I thought it, or some sort of
Okay,
issue with the
car
radiator or
problems
something
then.
Yeah, I don't think that was. I don't think the illness had anything to do with.
Maybe at that point though he was okay. Maybe those like they're like, oh, we think we might have to retire the car, and he's like, oh God, thank you. Like, please let me go sit in the bathroom. But yeah, definitely hope that he recovers quickly and we see some really good battles out of him, like he did against Sergio Perez last year.
All right. So, turning our attention to the Grand Prix itself, there are a number of actually some significant track changes. This is, I think, our second or third one with resurfacing that has taken place on the circuit itself. And there's been a number of other circuit changes that have been announced. So, I kind of have the outline of them here. And it says that the track and pit lane have been completely resurfaced. So, the whole thing. Not the third bit that like is in Austin, but it's rather the whole thing. So completely resurfaced there. The grass pavers in turn 7 on the left and right hand sides have been replaced with a layer of concrete. So that's interesting. A new debris fence has been installed between turns 13 and 14 on the left side, while the debris fence between turns 14 and 1 and turn 1 has been replaced with a new one. Okay. The guardrail and the tire barrier in turn 7 on the left have been realigned, assuming to promote less issues with safety. And then new openings have been installed on the turn 1 runoff on the right and turn 15 on the start finish straight as well. So, yeah, nothing gargantuan, I think, in any of these, but again, it's another track with a new resurface. So, assuming dry weather, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, would you expect to see higher grip conditions and faster lap times?
I definitely think we'll see faster lap times. We saw faster lap times than you and I expected out of Coda, and that was with only part of the track being resurfaced. So, yeah, as if the track does stay dry, which I'm sure we're going to discuss, it might not, as is frequently the case in Brazil. I do think we would see faster lap times. If it does rain, we might see a slicker track surface too. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But yeah, it sounds like a good investment in track upgrades and resurfacing, which Brazil is a very, very popular track that we hope stays on the calendar for a very long time. So this, I think, shows that the owners of the track are willing to put in the investment to make sure we can, keep having excellent, safe races here for a long time. I do think the bit about the additional track openings is kind of interesting. I guess maybe they put those in places where they've had issues getting cars off the track in a reasonable amount of time before. So, maybe that'll help to potentially reduce some safety car times and the like that. But I think this is a really good thing.
Yeah, I'm always in favor of additional safety measures and additional ways to get cars off of tracks a little bit better. If you find some weird places, you can have extended safety car periods during the race, or you could have, extended red flag and qualifying, when everybody's, on the edge and you just need to get the session done, and or you're chasing weather, which is the other thing we've seen with one lap in the dry and it's pouring rain by the end of that same lap. The Max Verstappen pole from a couple years ago, is an example of that. And Kevin Magnussen taking pole in the sprint that weekend, I think, is another great example of that as well. So, you've got those situations. So if you can kind of prevent those and get cars cleared off, yeah, all for it. I love it. So, okay, we're actually going to take a quick break. We're going to re-rack here. We're going to come back. We're going to get into our track facts. We'll talk about that weather. And then we're going to go straight into our predictions. It's a pivotal weekend for the championship. There's fortunes to be made. There's fortunes to possibly be lost here as well. So come on back. We're going to get into all of that in just a little bit. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back in. This is Season 6, Episode number 42 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Sao Paulo, don't call it Brazil, they don't like that anymore, GP race preview show. And you've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. And I've done a little bit of tweaking to my setup, so hopefully now things are all functioning the way that they should. We've actually tested the soundboard. Look at us. Yay, we're actually trying to be professional podcasters here. So it is time to turn our attention to the Interlagos, or as they also call it, the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache circuit. Those track facts are brought to us by the good folks at Pirelli Motorsport. So Cody, tell us about that Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache.
All right. So this weekend we are heading to the Interlagos track with that fancy name that I'm not even going to try. Located in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Number of laps around for the Grand Prix is going to be 71, and the length of the circuit is 2.677 miles. That's 4.309 kilometers. That's a little bit of a different order than I normally do. Tire selection from Pirelli for this is going to be the C3, C4, and C5 compounds. And track characteristics from Pirelli are going to be a 3 out of 5 for traction, 3 out of 5 for braking, 3 out of 5 for tire stress, 3 out of 5 for lateral load, lots of 3s out of 5s here, a 5 out of 5 for track evolution, 3 out of 5 for asphalt grip, 2 out of 5 for asphalt abrasion, and a 4 out of 5 for downforce. The qualifying lap record around the circuit, we see a lot of lap records, I think, from Bottas, and this is another one. So Valtteri Bottas set the qualifying lap record here in 2018 with a 1 minute 7.281 seconds, and he also set the race lap record at the circuit in the same year, 2018. That was with a 1 minute 10.540 seconds. Most wins at the Interlagos track under the current configuration goes to Alan Prost with 6 wins here, followed by a tie between Reutemann and Michael Schumacher for 4 wins apiece, and then another two-way tie for third between Vettel and Hamilton with 3 wins, and then a multitude of drivers with 2 wins. Most of them retired, but also Max Verstappen with 2 wins here. Most constructors' wins at this track under the current configuration is going to go to McLaren, who I'm sure hopes to add to their tally of 12 this weekend. Ferrari is in second, also probably hoping to add to their tally of 11 wins here. And then it is a 3-way tie for third between Red Bull, Mercedes, and Williams with 6 wins apiece, and Renault rounds up 4th place with 2 wins. What's the circuit like, Andy?
All right. Like many pre-World War II tracks, Interlagos features banked corners with the drivers beginning their lap on a sort of half oval. In fact, between 1957 and the track's return to the F1 calendar in 1990, Interlagos could be run as a giant oval. After wiggling through the Senna S and down to turn 4, the drivers then go through a snaking infield section with some challenging camber changes before slinging back up the hill and through the banked final turn 5. As for the weather, and the weather looks to play a significant role in a very significant weekend for both championships. And it's a sprint weekend, as if you needed anything more to pile on here. The sprint qualifying, which will happen on Friday, that forecast is a mix of clouds and sun early, then becoming cloudy later in the day. A high near 80, winds out of the southeast at 10 to 15. So the big factor on Friday is going to be the weather. And then on Saturday and Sunday, here comes the rain. For the sprint and qualifying day on Saturday, cloudy skies with a few showers later in the day. When does that hit? A high of 81, winds out of the east-southeast at 10 to 15, a 50% chance of rain. So definitely looks like we're going to see some weather on Saturday. And then as for Sunday and race day, cloudy with rain developing again later in the day. High of 77, winds out of the southeast at 5 to 10, a 60% chance of rain. So again, it's going to be, when does that rain hit? How intense does it hit? And does it take long for the circuit to dry out after the rain leaves? All going to be answered over the course of this weekend. So all to play for sure. All right.
I'd be all for having 2 races in Brazil, one under the current configuration and one on that big oval you were talking about. I think
that would be very, very interesting, but I don't think any of the current crop of F1 guys want to do the oval bit. Closest thing I think we've had to an oval was that Bahrain outer we did during the COVID year.
And that was a cool race. It was a little different, through the drivers for a loop. You had really, really short lap times. I think
George Russell almost getting win on debut.
The first win. And then you end up getting it for Perez instead.
Sergio Perez winning in for before they were
Aston
Racing
Martin,
Point. Racing Point. Racing Point. Yes, the Pink Panthers get their win. As I made a bad statement before that one because I think it was Racing Point and McLaren were both going for P3 in the constructors that year, and I said the only way Racing Point catches them is if they win the race, and then they went out and won the race. So I'm not saying anything like that in this battle moving forward. Let's just put it that way. And now it's time, speaking of that, now it's time to make statements about the weekend. It's time for our predictions game. Hopefully we both collectively do better than last week. But, we're aiming to improve here. So we shall start, as we are apt to do, with the pole sitter. The 2023 pole sitter was Max Verstappen, and he set it with a 1 minute 10.727. Cody, what's your thought here for our pole sitter?
I'm going to stick to my prediction from last week, even though it didn't come to fruition. We've seen good things out of Ferrari the last few races here. I think we're going to keep seeing it here. So I'm going to go again for Charles Leclerc as our pole sitter.
All right, very good. I'm going to keep riding the Lando train. Got to keep doing it. I also think that there is some science behind this because I do think that of all the tracks, this is the one that feels like the most best for McLaren. It's the closest one to kind of Singapore or Zandvoort, which was always very, very tight, very, very twisty. So there's a whole lot of good parts that I think suit the McLaren car in any real condition. So I'm going to go Lando Norris to get pole. And I'm also just kind of crossing my fingers that it comes true because we got to get him there, at least for me as a fan. Okay, and so what do we think our lap time is going to be? Keep in mind, we just talked about it. There's a chance of rain. So do you think it's going to be dry? And if so, what do you got your time? And are you hedging it all? But what you got?
Yeah, this one's tough because it's like if it's dry, it's probably going to be a lot faster than last year because of the track resurfacing. But if it's wet, it's probably going to be slower than last year. So I am betting, since you said the showers are coming later in the day, I am going to believe that the rain is going to affect our qualifying times here. So I'm going right around last year's qualifying time, just a touch slower at 1 minute, 10.800 seconds.
All right, very good. I'm going to bank on dry conditions. I'm going to say it's going to rain after the qualifying, if it's going to rain at all. But that could totally go out the window. But I'm committed to what my lap time is. So I'm saying it's a 110.587. I think given that resurfacing, given what we saw at COTA, the dramatic shift, even if it's changing conditions, if they're on slick tires, I think they go faster. So 110.587 is my lap time. Okay, so switching now to the Sunday race, the 2023 podium featured Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, basically in a arena of their own last year. And Fernando Alonso, let's not forget, Fernando Alonso had that epic battle late with Sergio Perez and managed to get on the podium, I think, on the last lap. So that, some great racing between the two of those guys there. So, Cody, what do you have for a race podium?
All right, now this might be a little bit of a long shot, but I am going to go full fanboy here. Max Verstappen races very well in the wet, and I'm just crossing my fingers that we get a nice, really good wet race where Verstappen can show his stuff beyond what that car can do right now in the dry. So I'm going to go with a Max Verstappen win, followed by Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz wrapping up the podium.
All right, very good. Okay, well, I guess here's where I go total fanboy too, and I don't really care because I do think even if it is wet, changeable conditions, we were talking about this in our pre-show conversation. I think there is a honey hole for each team in those tricky changeable conditions, and for the McLaren team, it seems to be right before you change over from the wets to the slicks. So if we're going to have a race where it's rain in and out, you're going to have a couple of rounds, I would assume, of that type of condition. So there is some logic behind it, but I'm also going full fanboy, and I don't care. I'm going to say Lando Norris wins this race. I do think that Ferrari form is real. You cannot ignore what they have done over the course of the last two races. So I'm going to give it to Charles Leclerc to come home P2. And here's where the number two driver, this is the payback, in my opinion, for the Hungary situation. Oscar Piastri makes it, comes home in P3, a 1-3 for McLaren to either, strengthen their lead in the constructors and try to get Lando Norris back into this drivers' championship even more than he did last week. All right. So our fastest lap and the driver who did it last year was Lando Norris with a 112.486. This could be a wild card. The fastest lap could be anywhere from really faster or really slower, depending on what the weather is going to do. I think we're both kind of hedging here. I'll go first here. I'm going to give this one to Carlos Sainz because I do think he's on incredible form, and I do think he may be the guy who ends up having to come in for the set of softs. Somebody always has to have the lonely race. And I'm going to give it to Carlos Sainz here, and I'm going to say it's a 117.658. Maybe in some tricky, changeable, weird racing conditions. Cody, what you got?
My logic pretty much all matches up with your logic for this, where I think we're going to have the tricky, changeable conditions, and we're going to have a driver out there with a lonely race who's going to have that opportunity to pit for better tires at the end and get that fastest lap. But I think it's going to be Oscar Piastri in that position, and I think he's going to do it with a 1 minute 15.541 seconds, although I do have a feeling that this is going to be one of those ones where we're going to be off by like 4 or 5 seconds if it ends up being totally dry.
Oh my God. If it's going to be dry, I think you're going to be in the 112s, 111s.
Yeah.
The qualifying might even be in the 109s for all we know. We may be setting track records if it actually is dry with the way that these cars, especially on a new surface like that. Woo, we could, well, anyway, it's a lap time. We're taking a stand. We're trying to do it, but because everything is so tight and because this weekend is so significant for both championships, we figured we would predict all the way down to P6. So our bonus picks for this race is P4, P5, and P6. So I'm going to go first here. While I do totally recognize Max Verstappen in the wet can be sublime, I'm not sure if it's quite enough to deal with that car. That car has still some gremlins in it, and as good as he is, if he can't get it up there in qualifying to start really well, I don't know if he's not going to come back. But I do have him respectable here. I've got him P4. I've got Lewis Hamilton coming home in P5 because, again, I think those tricky changeable conditions favor those drivers who do better. So I think of Lando, I think of Max, I think of Lewis, any one of those order. So I do think he will be up there. And George Russell, who I just think needs a better weekend, he can also get that car around. It'll be a slightly cooler. That's better for Mercedes, even in their current package. So I'm going to say Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell for my 4, 5, 6. Cody, what do you have?
All right. I have Oscar Piastri just missing out on the podium and getting that P4 spot. And I also have the Mercedes drivers in P5 and P6, but I have them flip-flopped from you. I have Russell in P5 and Hamilton in P6. We know that Hamilton has been very successful here in the past, but we also can't forget that George Russell did actually get his first race win here only a couple years ago in this generation of cars. So he is quite a strong performer here as well.
Yeah, this could be a very epic race with a lot of overtaking and a lot of fortunes rising and falling for sure. All right, so our prop bet for this week, because we have another sprint weekend, and it's more fun to try to do this with more points on offer, and God knows we could use them. So I'm selecting the sprint podium. So we'll get a point on the board for each one of these if we happen to get any one of them right. So I'll go first here. I'm going to say, again, I got to go full fanboy here. I'm going to say Lando Norris to come home in P1 in the sprint. We got to get him up there to get this championship within range. Carlos Sainz will dominate, I think, the early part of the weekend, and he might go a little bit backwards because of the weather. We'll have to see, but I think the sprint, because it's in the early part of the day, will probably be more dry and more traditional. And then I've also got Charles Leclerc coming home in P3 on the sprint as well. So, again, you can't ignore the Ferrari form, and I'm not trying to do that here. All right, Cody, what you got?
For the sprint, I do agree with you that I think Lando Norris is going to win it. I think the McLaren is going to be here, be performing very well here. And I think because the sprint, if I remember correctly, is supposed to be happening earlier in the day this time, before the traditional qualifying. I think that might happen before the rain, which, I think the dry conditions here we've seen through several dry races now that McLaren is very speedy, much better than the Red Bulls especially. So I think I've got Norris taking the sprint win, followed by Charles Leclerc P2 and Max Verstappen P3.
All right, very good there. We will lock those in, and we will recap where we fall out after this weekend. And again, this weekend promises to be very, very significant. So when and where can you find your F1 action this weekend? And I apologize, I don't have all the networks here, but I will give you the times. It's ESPN family of networks. I would just suggest searching for F1, or if you have a voice box, just say show me F1, and you'll find the sessions on the different ESPN family of networks. I imagine it's going to be a mix of ESPN2, ESPN News, and or even the big channel, I think, for the main race on Sunday. But practice one kicks off 10:30 a.m. Eastern. That's 9:30 a.m. for us here in the Central Time, followed by sprint qualifying, which happens 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. So if you want to take a long extended lunch, you go ahead and do that. Catch yourself a good sprint qualifying session at your favorite institution or watering hole, or even if you're just at home working, put it on TV if you want. You can catch the sprint Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central for that session. And then the qualifying for the traditional race will happen 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, right in the middle of your Saturday. So we can sleep a little bit. And then for the race itself, it'll be 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. I'm happy this time because there is no conflict with the local American football team this time. So I don't have to have a screen on with no sound like I did last week, which was very distracting from anything. So I can fully invest in my F1 and then change gears and do that. But Cody and I will be back to recap all of it, whether it's Sunday night or we'll record on Monday. I'm not yet quite sure, but we will work all of that out. We'll have a recap of this final leg of this triple header, and then we will set the stage as we're going to go to Vegas, baby. Going after that, we'll start to set the stage for that. So yeah, look out for a review of all of this, I think this is going to be one of the most significant, epic weekends of this season. It's all of the ingredients are here. Everybody's on really good form. The upgrade packages are pretty much done and on the cars now. And we've got weather and we've got a sprint weekend. So what drama is going to unfold over the course of this weekend, I'm not sure, but we'll be here to recap it all. I'm excited. I don't know about you, Cody. What's your thought?
I am very excited. Interlagos is always an exciting race, and it's always, close to the end of the season. So we usually see this race occur when title battles are coming down to the end, and it is no different this time. There's so many, players in for the championships, both championships at this point, this time, that it is going to be exciting no matter what happens. As far as not needing that screen, the muted screen for the American football, after what happened to our team last week, I'm surprised you want any screen at all.
Yeah, well, I'm a McLaren fan. I'm a glutton for punishment. What can you tell me? Hey, it's just when I go to work, I have two things on usually, especially when it gets cold out. I have the McLaren hat on, and then I have my Bears hat or my Bears jacket. So it's my two things I love that always disappoint me, but not this year. Dang it, it's going to be different. At least in the Formula One part. At least, God, I hope so. But anyway, we'll be here to recap what happens, good, bad, or indifferent. So for Cody, it's been Andy. Thank you very much for sticking with us. And as always, may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at outlapf1 podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.